Scott Prasser is from the University of Sunshine Coast. He's a fellow who's lived and worked in amongst Parliament and ministers. You've seen it all over a long period of time. Scott, you were back there in the days of the Fraser government, and if you can look at it from a sort of outsider looking in as well as an insider who's been able to get out, what is it about Canberra? I mean, why is it that Canberra's completely unkempt and out of control when it comes to what the rest of us in the real world are thinking about? It's like a bubble inside a bubble inside a bubble, isn't it?
That's right. Well, Canberra is a very different place from the rest of Australia. People who work there, it's what I call a one-industry town, and it's quite disconnected from what's going on in the rest of Australia. People there, without being derogatory to public servants, they have got a secure employment. Their income is far better than most of the rest of Australia. And for those of us who worked at Parliament House, the big building on top of the hill, it's a pretty isolating place.
Yeah, I know the late John Heron once said to me, he said, Parliament House is a building with a moat around it, which is called Capital Circle, with another moat around, and on the outside of the moat was Canberra, and then on the outside of that was another moat around that, which was the rest of Australia. I mean, it is isolating, and if you get into the ministerial wing like I did, it's even more isolating. I mean, you've worked in the ministerial wing, you understand the point. You can go for days without seeing anybody outside of your little ministerial bubble.
That's right, and the Commonwealth Parliament House, as you would know, is different from other Parliament houses because it's isolated from the rest of the city. You've got to get in a car, you want to go anywhere. And in the state parliaments, they're all located in the middle of the city. So you can walk out, meet ordinary people, mix it. But the Canberra Parliament, and because executive government now is located at Parliament House, everyone comes to Parliament House, no one goes out. So you can, as you say, you can be at Parliament House. It's very isolating, and you can't dare slip away at all because you feel you might miss something. So it's that sort of problem. And the problem is it's become very overcrowded, especially in the ministerial wing, because the number of staff have increased. It's a 24-hour sort of process going on. And so as a place to work for running the country, it's not a very functional, very efficient place.
You know, it's got 30 years next month since I first walked inside that whopping great big building, which a bloke I knew who worked for a minister in that 30-year period said to me, he said it could be turned into timeshare accommodation. Every member has their own suite of offices, which, you know, really is just two offices and a foyer, and they all have their own shower, their own toilet, their own bathroom, so you could actually rent it out. But in all seriousness, the isolation from the real world, I think, is now writ large with a lot of the policy decisions we're hearing. I mean, I'm very critical of the yes minister kind of short-term salve response to the drought. There's no big nation building, there's no big bold action. It's all about admiring a problem, administering a solution rather than actioning something.
Yes, well, that could be applied to many issues, and of course the other problem, as you would know, is that the Commonwealth Government is not directly involved in a lot of the policy, whether it's schools or running things. They're often left to the states or local government. So a lot of the federal ministers and federal departments are necessarily not involved in the day-to-day programs that they're actually paying a lot of money for. So all that sort of process goes on. And the trouble at Parliament House is that once you get there, you tend to stay there all day. You come early in the morning and you go home late at night. And it's a lot of people come to see you, but you don't get a chance often to get out because as a minister can't afford to really leave Parliament House at all. He's got to go to question time, he's got to meet delegations, he's got to go to cabinet. Everything revolves around Parliament House. So it's a place that really insulates you as well as isolates you from what's going on. And that same applies to the staff.
So staff, so ministers, members of Parliament, backbench members, private members, however you want to refer to them, they need to really be the eyes and the ears on the ground, talking to those ministers to make sure that what they're doing is real, because the people in their ears tend to be the Sir Humphreys, the bureaucrats. They're the ones that are saying, oh no, Minister, we do it this way. and we have this subordinate legislation, and you know, actually we make that decision, Minister. You don't. You know,
Yeah.
the legislation has given us the power. These are all the procedural problems that we've now got in Australia.
Yeah. Now, look, in the first Abbott government where I worked, there was a sort of requirement that ministerial staff should be based in Canberra. So if your minister came from somewhere else, it was very hard to be located back in that city or town. Now that's been relaxed, but what that did, it meant that the senior staff had to sort of stay in Canberra. The minister would fly back to their own town, and that to me was a very silly idea of trying to control things. Now that's been relaxed, and I think it's very sensible. I think it's very important that staff are not just living continuously in Canberra. I think it's important that ministerial staff do get back to where their minister is located and understand what's going on in the electorates. So that's an important process that must be allowed. And sometimes, you know, it's important to be in Parliament and it's important to be in Canberra, but it's also important to get back and see. When I worked for some ministers, we went up to different country areas. Emerald I went to, and that was a great eye-opener for me to go to some place I'd never been before and to see what the locals were really interested in.
Well, I mean, you teach public policy, you teach government. I mean, this is a bit of a failure of government. I mean, it seems to me our parliamentary democracy now is muffling the sound, muzzling the sound, the voices of the quiet Australians, as we call them. And there is a kind of systemic fail that's occurring right before our very eyes.
Yeah, I think all national parliaments have this sort of problem. You know, Washington has this problem, Canberra has this problem, and state parliaments don't have quite the same issue. And I think it's really important that we don't begrudge members to get back out to the electorates and see what's going on. But I think the problem has become also that ministers don't even get down to their departments to talk to what's going on. They're stuck at that Parliament House. So I think it's very important that the electorate gets its voice heard much more clearly. And a lot of us don't understand why governments do some of the things they do. I've been studying government for 20 years and I can't understand it sometimes. Why do they do that decision? Because sometimes I don't understand the feedback coming from the electorate of why that's a stupid idea.